All right, now we got to keep it low because I'm going off to my job as a 1-900 operator right after this. We're going to start with this show, however, 9 a.m. news. We're going to begin with the news that happened overnight. Doug Jones, can you believe this? Were you shocked that Doug Jones won in Alabama? He is now officially the projected winner in the Senate race out of Alabama. And if that result stands, then the embattled candidate Roy Moore has lost. And the latest update we just got is that result is going to stand. This after Roy, faced accusations of sexual misconduct, and a lot of them. There's a lot to cover on this, so please welcome, to discuss it all with us, the moderator of Meet the Press. NBC's own Chuck Todd is here.
You got it. I'm not going to do this with a live audience. This is different.
I mean, I get a little
live audience.
I know, it says like energy.
This is
so don't screw it up. Don't screw it up.
Rafters and everything.
Laugh at you.
That's what I feel like. This is what the safety net.
So I went to bed last night because I have to get up early for the show. And the last thing I said was, Roy Moore's got it. He's got it. Like, there's no way the people of Alabama are going to send a liberal Democrat to the U.S. Senate to represent them. Talk about being wrong. Way wrong.
Look, this was a bunch of things had to happen for Doug Jones to win. Okay, it wasn't just one thing. A bunch of things had to happen. But the biggest, I think, was a combination of two things for them win this election. African-American turnout was through the roof. It was exactly what it needed to be. It was higher, actually, than it was for Barack Obama in 2012. Wow. So that's a big deal. African-American women in particular, I think, when you look at the gender gap among white women, it was still a big advantage for Roy Moore. But it was African-American women that made a huge, is why the gender gap was such a big gender gap.
Do we know what drove them from the exit polling?
Right now, it appears it was more, I think, the combination of Jones having an ability to win, number one, which a lot of African-American Democrats in Alabama hadn't seen that in a while. And the second is Donald Trump. You know, because what we saw in Alabama was very similar to what we saw in Virginia last month. The areas where there was Democratic voters, the turnout was way up. And the areas where there's Republican voters, the turnout was average to down. That's why when you went to bed last night and you saw, and it looked like everything was close but leaning more, because we saw the overall turnout and we thought, okay, that's what it's looking like.
And the exit polls had been suggesting that most of the voters didn't care about the sexual assault allegations against him, but like 60-some%.
Yeah, what we saw, though, was in places like Birmingham, Huntsville, and Mobile, turnout was even higher than expected.
Wow.
And yet the turnout in places in rural Alabama was lower than expected. And so that uneven turnout was just enough.
20,000 write-in votes by Republican voters.
20,000 write-in votes, which is the margin.
Who said, I'm going to write, Charles Krauthammer, whoever they picked.
Right, and that margin, by the way, is basically the margin between Jones and Moore.
So what does this mean for Steve Bannon? Because he went down there, this was his guy.
Yeah.
This was, at first it was like a to the establishment Republicans. He said, I don't want your guy, I want Roy Moore. And Roy Moore lost, and Bannon campaigned for him up to the bitter end. He was supposed to be this big god.
I think it means that there's a whole bunch of Republican incumbents that are waking up this morning not worried less about Steve Bannon and more about that Democratic turnout.
Remember, he was going to go to Breitbart. He was going to unleash the artillery. He was going to be having the flank. It's not working out so well for him.
You know, in order to run a political party, in order to be the big kingmaker, you got to prove you can win, and he hasn't been able to prove that. And then you're going to need some resources and some money. If you're a major donor and you were watching Steve and saying, okay, who am I going to bet on here? Mitch McConnell or Steve Bannon? You watched last night, you're like, wait a minute. You blew it in Alabama?
Right.
You blew it in Alabama?
How to turn a red state blue.
Yeah, if you if you can't win with this message in Alabama, where can you win?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I think that's why I think Steve Bannon's going to be a lonely guy. A lonelier guy today than he was yesterday.
So what about President Trump? Because people who don't like him say it's a huge loss for him. He did back a different candidate initially, and then he didn't get his candidate in as the nominee.
The irony is that he picked the wrong candidate each time. And there was a third candidate. No, I mean, I never actually understood. I mean, I never understood why he picked Luther Strange the first time. I didn't understand why he should have picked this other guy, Mo Brooks. There was a third guy in there who was sort of sane Tea Party. Yep. Okay? Is what I would put it. It was sort of the halfway in between Luther Strange and Roy Moore. That was the Goldilocks conservative
candidate. But by the end of this race,
and
President Trump was doing robocalls for Roy Moore. He went down to the border and pushed for him.
Who fears Donald Trump today on Capitol Hill? That's the question I have. Donald Trump has proven he can't control his base. He tried to for Luther Strange. It didn't work. And he can't close the deal at the end.
Well, but Roy
I
Moore
think
was
you're
an
going to have-
exceptionally
no
bad
doubt.
candidate.
No
I mean, it's
doubt.
like you don't always have a guy who's accused of molesting 14-year-olds running
right.
on the ticket.
But Megyn, if Alabama was the only special election we had this year as evidence, I'd say, okay, fair point. You can chalk it up to Roy Moore. But we've had places, we've had special elections all over the country this year. Mike Pompeo was at CIA. We had a special election in Philly. All these ruby red places, Democrats came close in Kansas, came close in Montana, came close in Georgia,
Yeah,
right?
but
And you
coming
saw a
close
building, right?
means
but,
losing.
However, though, it was getting closer. It was getting closer, and you saw this Democratic enthusiasm. And then we saw Virginia. And then the unthinkable happened there. They got such a huge Democratic turnout, they almost flipped that state House of Delegates. First time that had happened in a long
And now,
time.
so now the
now
losing, coming close is turning into winning.
Now they're turning into winning.
Okay, let's talk about President Trump and Kirsten Gillibrand. Have you seen? Do you guys see what happened there? So she took a shot at him over the Me Too movement and all the women who have come forward, and he took a shot back by tweet. You'll be shocked to learn. This is what he tweeted. Lightweight Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a total flunky for Chuck Schumer, this is the president, and someone who would come to my office begging for campaign contributions not so long ago, parenthetical, and would do anything for them, is now in the ring fighting against Trump. Very disloyal to Bill and crooked. Used. And now.
Have you found it's really hard to do his voice in parenthetical?
Yeah, you
like
have to say
it's really difficult.
You have
Maybe
to
these
say
tweets is always
How did I do?
The parenthetical. I think you did great.
Okay. So USA Today is out today with an editorial. Here's a quote from a president who would all but call a senator a whore is unfit to clean toilets in Obama's presidential library or to shine George W. Bush's shoes. They go on. They go on to say he pours the gasoline of sexist language and lights the match, gleefully knowing how it will burst into flame.
You know what's interesting about how he reacted to her? So she's actually the fourth Democratic senator, I believe, to call for his resignation over the accusations of sexual harassment. The first three were men. Bernie Sanders, Jeff Merkley, and I think Cory Booker.
Yep.
The first time he seems to notice this is when Kirsten Gillibrand does it. Coincidence, I'm not sure, but that is something I think it only adds, I think, fuel to this rage that's building among many women who look at this and think he seems to be tougher on women. He seems to get more enraged when a woman criticizes him than when a man criticizes him.
I don't know anything about that.
I've never. And you know, I say this, I remember I always came in second to you in the number of tweets from candidate Trump back in the day.
How many did you get? I got over 100.
Yeah, he was on me for a while, but I remember in the New York Times thing, my wife goes, "Oh, you're second to Megyn Kelly. You're not first. She beat you."
Congratulations.
Yeah, or something.
But this is, I want to challenge you on this because, first of all, what the president's family and defenders would tell you is that he's an equal opportunity offender. He offends everybody. He attacks people's looks, men, women, you name it.
There's truth to that.
There's a long, long list of people like you.
He gets sleepy eyes.
Sleepy eyes.
I have no idea what it means.
Right.
By the way, neither does he. He says when you pick a nickname, you have to stick to it.
But you know, the language with women is always different with him. And obviously, I mean, he retweeted people calling me a bimbo, not to mention the blood comment, which later came out in a Maureen Dowd column that he intended to imply exactly what people thought he implied. And so there's a real question about whether he deserves the benefit of the doubt on this tweet about what he was trying to imply with that parenthetical.
Well, and I think that's fair. I don't
But
know.
who cares? Do people care? That's the question.
And I'll say this: I do think that there's this line here on the outrage meter when it comes to President Trump. When I understand why people, the USA Today editorial, for instance, jumped out at me this morning in this respect. People get fired up. They get really angry about Donald Trump, and I think of Spinal Tap. Oh yeah, we're going to turn outrage to 11 now. There is a point, though, where that isn't heard by some people anymore.
Oh, not only is it not heard by them.
It almost.
But it fires
backlashes.
them up more. And a lot of people are sick of living in a PC culture.
Right.
And they may not like everything he says and does, but they like the fact that he's pushing back.
And I do think if Democrats are going to push back here, you got to sort of
pick your battles.
Pick your battles.
Yep. You can't express outrage in response to everything.
I think this is part of our challenge in the press. Some of our colleagues, I think, have almost respond too much to him. And when I say to them, you're actually playing into what he wants. They want to label us as the opposition party. We're not the opposition. We're here in the middle of trying to call him like we see him. If you get engaged as if you're with him, then you do look like the opposition.
Well, there's a question even about, whether what should Senator Gillibrand do in response to this? She was on the Today Show this morning saying it was a sexist smear. I don't know. When my 3-year-old acts up at home, I ignore that bad behavior because I don't want to encourage it. right? I think the worst response you can give somebody trying to bully you or annoy you is the not me, right? They say that children want attention for being the good me. If you won't give it, then they'll be the bad me. And if you still won't give it, the worst response is the not me. And you give them the not me if you want them to stop the bad behavior. Not that President Trump is trainable. He's 71 years old, right? but there's a question about whether she should even just stand strong, move on, keep on her message as opposed to sexist smear and back and forth.
Look, I think it's hard. I mean, you and I were both hit by him, and you get angry in the moment. You can get angry in the moment, and everybody's a human being, so I don't want to sit here and criticize
I was shocked.
Senator Gillibrand. Right. But because we all have an emotional moment, you know. What I try to counsel is just be careful here. It's like punching a hole in drywall. It feels good in the moment, and then you realize, oh, I've got to go patch up the wall now. You know, you're able to express some outrage, but then to what end?
Well, when it comes to journalists, too, there's a trap being laid because he'd love for you to walk through it and disqualify yourself from covering him. That's right. And that's the last thing that we should allow to happen.
Look what they're doing to the Mueller briefing.
Yeah.
The Mueller investigation, almost looking for anybody who might be remotely showing any sort of, well, they didn't like the president, therefore they can't investigate.
Meanwhile, that's not true. I mean, you can really dislike any given president and still report on him fairly. Right. Your reporting ought to be the guide. Same thing with somebody investigating him. A lot of prosecutors can't stand the defendant they're prosecuting, but it doesn't mean they can't do an honest job. Chuck Todd, it is a pleasure, my friend.
This was a lot of fun.
They didn't do.
No. Live audience, you never know.
Thank you. Don't forget to watch Chuck on Meet the Press, the best show on Sundays.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.